Hey guys, what is going on? It's me, BakuriBox12 here, and welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God item discussion video. Last time I talked about the Robe of the Mad Scientist and why I think it needs a rework of some kind. Not necessarily a buff, but definitely a greater focus that helps differentiate it from the Robe of the Grand Sorcerer. As I said in that video, UTs should be well distinguished from tiered items as much as possible. We don't want them to become situational to the point of impracticality, but they should almost always be considered as a swap out, or emphasize something that the tiered items don't. That being said, the item in question today is something that I'm not even sure where I stand in regards to what should be done about it. And of course, the item I'm referring to is the Wand of the Bulwark. Should this weapon be buffed or changed in some way to make it more useful? That's the question I propose. With the Robe of the Mad Scientist, I was sure. I want that item to be changed. But here, it's a bit iffy. For anyone who doesn't know, Wand of the Bulwark is a white bag UT item that drops from the Snake Pit. It's one of the oldest white bags in the game. It has a really cool sprite. It still feels awesome to get one. But when it comes to gameplay, it is a borderline vanity item. And the reason for that is because of its shot type. It's very comparable to the Sandman sorcerers found in the desert, where the shots just float around you in a figure-8 pattern, damaging everything nearby. It's a very nice spectacle for the eyes, blanketing an entire area in these shots, but as you can clearly see, this is one of the most inaccurate weapons in the game. Not only does it shoot in 4 different angles relative to your cursor, but the rate of fire is cut down to 33%, and the projectiles themselves don't exactly have a lot of range. The damage range is extraordinary, between 350 and 450, and like the other ones, they pierce their enemies. So if you want to plant your minefield and lure enemies into it can be pretty fun to just fire away and watch the chaos as everything explodes around you. When gathering footage for this video, I actually had quite an enjoyable time just running around in Godlands, trying to see how many shots I could stack and how many gods I could kill. But as you can imagine, or if you've experienced it firsthand, because of the bizarre shot pattern we're dealing with here, it almost feels random whether or not you hit a target. There is a way to manipulate where the shots go. If you move your cursor around your character in a 1, 2, 3, 4 figure-8 pattern and perfectly time it every 4 shots, then you can manipulate your projectiles into moving forward, creating a vertical figure-8 pattern. But 1, that requires a rather uncanny amount of focus, and 2, the range still isn't that great. It's not ideal for long-range fights in the slightest, nor for stationary targets. If you know you can tank the shots, then yeah, you can walk right up to the enemy and sit on them, and I actually found farming sprite worlds to be rather enjoyable this way. But Septavius, Stheno, even Malphus, it just became too busy. The most fun that I had with Bulwark, recreationally so to speak, was in the Godlands, where I was just messing around, setting my trap, luring enemies into it, and using my Sorcerer's Scepter to take out any long-range enemies. It was a fantastic construct killer, good at killing those green king dudes. I still don't know what their names are, let me see. Oh, Shield Orc Kings, that's right. I even tried fighting the killer bee nest with nothing but my Bulwark and Scepter. And surprisingly, it wasn't that bad. I was able to nail the mini nests a couple of times, but then I switched over to conducting and it was immediately faster, so again, not the most practical. Interestingly though, I did find it to be strikingly reliable when rushing the abyss of demons. Since the brutes chase you, it's almost guaranteed for them to collide with your shots if you continuously shoot them behind you, and because of the rather potent damage each shot has, enemies are dying in 1 or 2 hits, if they're not already colliding with multiple shots to begin with. It's still pretty awkward to hit stuff head on, like if you get stuck in a corner or have to turn around, but in the case of the Sorcerer, I did have my Scepter to fall back on and pick up the slack. I found that to be a very pleasant surprise. I can't say you're better off than just picking a melee, or even a priest with recomp shooting backwards, but it's not a place I expected to see much use. In fact, it's one of the only dungeons that you really can rush effectively with it. Sewers is probably about the same, inherently more risky because of the sick, but other places like Mad Lab, not so much. Sprite Worlds is unnecessary. Snake Pits, definitely not, because it takes forever to kill the walls. Abysses seem to be the standout there. 90% of the time, it's an item best enjoyed when pursuing comical shenanigans, like doing an all-Bulwark tomb, or shatters or lost halls, my condolences. Or just messing around with a big group of enemies, be it lowlands, highlands, godlands, doesn't matter. Gather a big group of them and watch the fireworks. it's enjoyable, it's cathartic. The utility may be in question, but you can't argue the entertainment value. The two areas where Bulwark genuinely shines and has its moment in the spotlight is in the Haunted Cemetery, because before each wave of enemies spawns, you can preemptively fire a whole bunch of shots so that when they do spawn, they immediately run into them and you can lure them around into your cesspool of damage. And that works for nearly every wave of that dungeon. Rock Dragon is also a place I've heard is pretty useful. Since that event boss is so fast and sometimes unpredictable, you may not even be able to hit him accurately with a straight long-range weapon. So being able to lazily throw out these high damage attacks and let the Rock Dragon run into them is a pretty good feeling. But aside from those two spots, not much. And I'm not saying that I want Bulwark to shine in tons of different areas, because then obviously you run the risk of overshadowing the tiered items and the other UTs that are supposed to be better. I get that it drops from the snake pit, it's not supposed to be the best item in the world, but unfortunately whenever you compare it to other white bag UTs that drop from other dungeons of a similar tier, Bulwark is an outlier, and not in the good way. Case in point, the Undead Lair drops a Doom Bow. It's one of the best bows in the game. Insanely high damage, but it's a single shot, and it's slower. It's a trade-off from the really fast triple shot of the Covert. But for a lot of players, it's worth it, especially when you can paralyze enemies with the quiver. Take it a step further, Abyss of Demons. Demon Blade. Great swap-out sword for the melee classes. Maybe you're not going to use it all the time, but it's great for clearing minions, pairs amazingly with Augmer, and because melees have generally high defense, you can afford to get closer to enemies. Even the Sprite World. Cloak of the Planewalker is one of the best cloaks for the rogue. Heck, the Spirit Staff from the Magic Woods arguably has more application. It's a fun, fast little weapon right there. The only one that I would say is similar and rivals Bulwark's in practicality is the Staff of Extreme Prejudice, which also drops from the Sprite World. It's kind of like Bulwark in the sense that you have to get right up in an enemy's face for it to be effective, yet at the same time, it's also the exact opposite of Bulwark. Instead of being lazy and tossing out shots that cover a wide area, you have this single pixel of concentrated raw damage that makes it feel like you're using a spell bomb as your weapon, and if you don't sit directly on top of every enemy you fight, you'd be better off using literally any other staff. So by that logic, I would actually say EP is even more situational than Bulwark, but not by much. And if you're a more risky player who likes to sit on top of everything, you could probably argue that point. But even so, let's say EP is worse. It still has Planewalker to fall on. It's not the only white to drop in its respective dungeon. It's sharing a room with another white bag item, and let's just say they're not exactly splitting the rent evenly. Bulwark doesn't have that. It's the only item that drops in the snake pit, and so it stands out more. And the only reason that that matters is because it's inconsistent. It makes Bulwark feel, again, like an outlier. For a dungeon that's easier than the UDL and the Abyss, to have a worse white bag item as your reward feels wrong. And look, I'm totally fine with there being UTs in this game that are inherently situational and kind of weird and wacky. They're not really that good, but they're kind of cool. But I'm not sure if I want Bulwark to be that item. I almost feel like it deserves better. Part of me feels like it should be given, at the very least, a small buff, whether it be to its rate of fire, maybe increase the size of the projectile so it's easier to hit stuff, increase the lifetime of the shots so they linger for more time, add a small homing property to them, yeah, that would be too good, but I'm just saying, I feel like there's probably a collective 10 people who use this item unironically. And again, when comparing it to other items like Planewalker, Doombow, D-Blade, I'm not sure if that's right. At the same time, it is one of the oldest items in the game, and I'm not exactly one to tamper with the past. Granted, they've already changed old UTs like Oreo, giving it a longer duration. Cronus was also a big one because Kabam made Aetheryte, and yeah, that's for another time. So it's not an unreasonable request to have these older items changed to meet modern standards, but should they be changed? Should the Wand of the Bulwark be changed? Should it be better? Can it be better? Would you have to rework the item entirely to make it effective? Is the whole idea of becoming a Sandman Sorcerer gimmicky in and of itself, and will never be practical no matter how much you fine-tune it? Maybe. Maybe that's just the kind of item Bulwark is. And if that's how it is, so be it. But if there's a way to make the item better, any item in the game better, I feel that's a topic worth exploring. If we could get a better game out of it, and no matter how small of a form, it's worth consideration. That's what I think anyway. Let me know what you guys think, if Bulwark should stay the way it is, if a buff is necessary, and if there are any other major items in the game that you think are in need of a change. Let me know, I'd be curious to look into those cases as well. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya. Even the Sprite World, Cloak of the Planewalker, one of the best cloaks for the rogue.